have no problem with Richard Cordray, yet you voted against him. Why?
Well, that's right. None of us have a problem with Richard Cordray, at least to my knowledge. The reason we voted against him is because we've suggested to the president that this CFPB, this so-called consumer agency, has abject power over credit in this country. Abject power without any responsibility, any transparency, any accountability. And what we want to do is correct that by having a board of directors to which this person has to report, have to report to the appropriations process in Congress, have to report to other processes that literally all other agencies have to. We cannot give a total czar that even the president can't suggest things to or can't control running this agency and determining the credit worthiness or the credit situation for people all over the country. This is the worst doggone piece of legislation I've seen since I've been here. It's even worse than Obamacare.
So you instead would like to see some sort of board of directors. Where does that suggestion go then?
Well, we're letting the president know we'd be happy to vote for Mr. Cordray, I think, if he would come out and amend this stupid bill and allow the taxpayers of America some rights that aren't given here. You're going to give a total czar, total power, not even reportable to the president, not reportable to the appropriations processes in Congress, not reportable to Congress, total power over the credit of people throughout the country. That is not what our country's about. We've never done that before, and yet that's how broadly this Dodd-Frank bill is. And it's killing small banks. It's killing financial institutions all across this country. It's making them incapable of giving loans to small businesses and other businesses that create jobs. It's one of the worst bills I've ever seen in my whole 35 years in the United States.
The president said shortly after the defeat of this nomination that he said, you know, quote, "We are not giving up." Is it your concern that he may use a recess appointment?
Well, he's been known to do that. We'll try and stop that because
How would you stop
that is not the way to do it. Why don't we get a president who's willing to work with Congress? What we're asking for is not unusual. It certainly isn't flagrant. It certainly isn't excessive. It's having a board of directors that supervises this person so that this person is not an almighty God in bureaucratic dress.
Okay,
and frankly, that's not a bad request. We want some transparency. We want some accountability to the Congress. We want accountability to the appropriations process. That's why we have a Congress. That's why we have an appropriations process.
All right, Senator.
And the president he's oblivious to all this.
All right, let me just stop you there and listen to what the president had to say and what his assessment is about this defeat.
You know, we have a Congress right now, Republicans in Congress right now, who seem to have entirely forgotten how we got into this mess. And part of the reason was because we did not empower our regulators to make sure that they were ensuring fair play.
So what's your response to this, and what's your response to people, Americans, who say this is yet another example of Congress, the White House, not getting along, and yet one more thing that's not getting done?
Well, the president knows that he can beat up on Congress and people will like that, and so that's what he's doing. Instead of working with Congress to provide some accountability and some transparency so people will know that they're not going to be regulated into the ground by a single individual with almighty power and a $500 million a year budget, I mean, all he's got to do is call up and say, look, I'll work with you. Let's get some of these constraints put into law, and then let's get Mr. Cordray on, and I think he'd have an easy time if he did that. He doesn't work with Congress. You've seen it. He's either out of the country or he doesn't really weigh in. He doesn't pull people down to the White House like he should. He hasn't been a leader that we need, and frankly...
You don't disagree that there needs to be some regulation. You don't like the method that's being suggested by the White House?
No, I agree that I don't disagree that regulation sometimes is very important. This administration has been the most over-regulatory administration in history. And we're just suffering the problems because the small business can't grow because they're so over-regulated. The banks are so over-regulated they can't loan. They're scared to death. They're going to be indicted. And this is wrong, and this president ought to know it. And he ought to work with us rather than just always blaming Congress for everything when he hasn't provided the leadership that we need to have Congress really do what he wants to have done and do it the right way.
And Senator Hatch, less than a year from now, we're talking about the presidential election of the Republican field of candidates. Who do you like? Who are you backing?
Well, I believe there's only one person who really has a chance of winning on the Republican side, and he's the best nominee there, and the only one with extensive private sector experience of great success and extensive public sector experience of great success, and that's Mitt Romney. I've endorsed Romney, and I have to say I don't think I know every one of those Republicans. I like every one of them. They're good people, but I don't think any of the others have that type of broad experience that could help our country at this miserable time that we're in right now, when we clearly don't have the leadership either in Congress or in the presidency to be able to pull our country out of the mess it's in.
Senator Orrin Hatch.
Romney can. Romney can.
Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Up next, she is currently Secretary of State, but Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign